Hello, I'm Lynn Finch with another weekly episode of the No-Cash Allowance. Today I'm talking to you as Lynn, a Navy brat who grew up to write a book about allowances. For over 200 years, people who have been raised in the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine, and Coast Guard families have been called military brats. In every generation, there are military brats. Not only am I a Navy brat, but as an early baby boomer, I grew up post-World War II, the daughter of greatest generation parents. I'm the granddaughter of Finnish immigrants and grandmother of 3 Gen Zers and 1 Gen Alpha. Generations are defined as people who have similar historical, social, and economic experiences, and they share these experiences as a generation. What does that have to do with money? I want to emphasize here that in my book and in my entire life, I have learned to track money as a number. I can see money management over time, and that is the lesson that my kids learned and that I wrote a book about. When I look back over time at the handwritten records of my Finnish immigrant grandparents and compare those to the digital records of today, I can see very clearly both methods record money as a number, even though they're more than a century apart. My parents grew up after World War I and experienced the Great Depression. Many people they knew, and my husband's grandfather, lost all their money in the bank crash. So they started all over again. They obviously were very thrifty. They were careful with finances, saving as much as they could and fixing before buying. And they also had to endure the challenges during World War II with rationing of supplies. My dad, after 2 years of college, went into the Navy in 1933, served for 4 years, and then he left. He went to a business college for a while. He still couldn't finish college, got married in 1939 and re-enlisted and served in the Navy until 1957 when he retired. And we moved from Norfolk, Virginia to Superior, Wisconsin, where he could finish his last 2 years of college. Our family of 4 lived for 2 years on the GI Bill and his Navy retirement. I can remember him sitting at the kitchen table, writing out bills, writing numbers on paper, and then a lot of time he was spent there. He was also studying. He was always studying. So I saw that numbers were important as we managed our money when we were growing up. After I was married, he gave me a document with all of my wedding expenses neatly written out in his very careful hand. And when I compared that to my daughter's wedding expenses, it was quite a shock. However, to help them save money, I sewed both of their wedding dresses. I had learned to sew by my mother, and she had sewn my wedding dress. And it's another skill that we carried forward in our family. My husband is of the silent generation, sometimes known as war babies. They were cash reliant, didn't like going into debt, and they liked to pay for items in full with cash they already had. His parents were self-employed and they kept all their cash in a jar in the cupboard, but they kept carefully written ledgers for their businesses. Baby boomers like me are said to be more financially secure than previous generations. We're the first generation to use retirement to mean enjoying life after the kids have left. We remember the energy crisis and the runaway inflation of the 1970s. I got my first checkbook to manage my student loans when I went to college. When we married in 1968, we shared one checkbook and one credit card for a gas station. We had moderate paying jobs, but a scary pile of bills. We started a written ledger to keep track of our must-pay expenses, and after we paid them, there wasn't a lot left. And we were definitely living paycheck to paycheck. And we didn't have a credit card like you might have today, because at that time you needed documented proof of 6 months of steady employment. When I became a mom, I knew I wanted my kids to own their own money, make their own decisions, and learn that money wasn't all for fun. We were managing by then with a checkbook and credit cards. So out of convenience, I started writing their allowances as a number, and they soon took over when they could write the numbers themselves. They received allowances starting in preschool, and they could earn additional money, and every transaction, all money in and all money out, was written in their accounts. They had a historical record of their spending. I added kid-size obligations. Buying school supplies was a start. It's their day job. In high school, they managed hundreds of dollars each semester for many of their day-to-day expenses. Now, this is money we would have spent on them anyway. We simply transferred control to them. I was not involved in making decisions about their money. They were completely in charge of keeping track and living by the results of their decisions. As a Navy brat, this would have been the best allowance ever. I could take it with me. I'd be totally in charge of my money. My parents wouldn't have to help me control my money. This system can work for all kids, especially those 1.6 military brats out there today. My daughters are Gen Xers. They're comfortable using new technologies to manage their finances as numbers. They use the same allowance method they grew up with to teach their kids to manage money. My grandchildren all had no cash allowances before they started school. 3 are now Gen Z teenagers. They have adapted to using digital money transfer services and transitioning to having accounts in financial institutions. My youngest is a Gen Alpha, growing up in a fully digital world. He didn't live in a time when there wasn't an iPhone. His is likely to be the first cashless generation, with only 10% of 6 to 18-year-olds spending with cash today. When I send him a card with old-fashioned cash in it, he hands it over to his mom and adds a number to his allowance account. Easier to manage, he tells me. When I was a teenager, my father said, always pay your bills on time. Always. Money in a military family, is a precious commodity, one to be managed carefully. My parents experienced that Great Depression and raised children during the difficult times of World War II. Their financial challenges shaped their thrift habits that filtered throughout my formative years. As a result, I've disciplined myself to follow our money as numbers. First we wrote it on paper, now we enter it into a computer. I created a successful allowance system for my kids and wrote a book to share it with other parents. We managed to save for a comfortable retirement because we've always been careful with our money decisions. The link to this blog is in the description below. I want to thank you for listening. And if your kids start to manage their money as a number, they will become better money managers. Thank you.